Your identification matches your IP address. Approved. Oh, absolutely not. Approved. Direct bookings. We all want them. We want to be able to build our business on our own land and not just rely on Airbnb, VRBO,
Booking.com.
But what's the biggest concern people have?
I'd say after, how do they, make the actual reservation and get the funds? It's how do they screen that guest and verify that they're going to be a great guest for their property?
That's exactly what we're going to talk about today. Hosting hot tip. When bookings come through on the OTAs like Airbnb or VRBO, you do need to make sure the guest went through that platform's verification process. Airbnb especially will tell you whether or not that guest has gone through a verification process. But what about when someone books direct? And is Airbnb's verification process even that detailed? What exactly does it entail? So this is a big concern for a lot of people when they start bringing on direct bookings into their business, which we still highly encourage. If you are just leveraging Airbnb for your guests, then you're running an Airbnb, and we want you to be running a hospitality business. So all you need is a solid proof system to verify the guest. What are we verifying? We're verifying that they're not sex offenders, they are who they say they are, they're the right fit for your property and what their needs are for their stay, they align. There's a lot of things that we can go through a thorough verification process. And you know what else is big these days? Midterm stays. If a guest is staying over 28, 30 days, in most states, that brings them into tenancy laws, right? They are now a tenant, making that background verification process even more important. What's their credit score like? Are they going to pay their bill with you? So all these things need to be dialed in for your booking process, and we're going to go through that.
Now, I know what you're thinking. You're probably scared, like, oh my gosh, is the guest going to want to go through all of this? Let's stop for a minute. Let's think. When you check into a hotel, what's the first thing they ask you after they want your credit card? They ask you for your ID. I want you to change your mindset about this. The guest will actually welcome this part of your booking process. It's going to legitimize you as a host, and that they can ensure that everyone that has stayed there before is legit, you are legit, they're going to welcome this. And that is a red flag. If a guest doesn't want to go through this process with you, they're probably not the right guest for you. I mean, I have no problem whenever I'm booking an Airbnb, a VRBO, staying at a hotel. I have no problem handing over my ID. I'll gladly do it, even if they ask for other guests, damage waiver signatures, all of those things. Those are the type of the guests that you want. And I think you'll understand that that's the normal process across the board when using someone's property, whether it be a short-term rental or a hotel. So fear not about adding this to your process.
All right, so we went over all the theory of guest verification, but exactly how does it work? Okay, so for direct bookings, let's assume that you have a property management software or a channel manager. We use Hostfully. If you want more information about them, check the link in the show notes. But here's what happens. When a guest goes to our direct booking website, they select the dates they want. When they go through that process, we ask them for their phone number. They do take a picture of their ID, which is then uploaded into our software. Who else is coming on the stay? How old are they? What are their IDs? So we ask for all this information prior to booking. And then they pay. And once the paying is made in full, you could set different settings there. You could have them pay 50%, what have you. Once they pay whatever you request of them, their booking is confirmed. But they're then sent an email that has a link that says, wonderful, we have you in our calendar, all set to stay with us at ABC property. We do need to ask you to go through our guest verification process for the security of yourself, the home, and our neighborhood. They click on the link, and our verification process takes less than 5 minutes. And what happens there is the guest has to take a picture of themselves and their ID, and the software will make sure that those things match up. The things that it looks for, I'm going to check my list here because it checks for so much. It checks for make sure the ID matches the selfie, the social profile scan, and the identity isn't fabricated, so they make sure that this is an actual human being. The email address checks out to make sure that it wasn't just recreated, a few days ago, that their IP address that they're booking from matches where they say they're from. Credit card verification, make sure they're not sex offenders. What else do we have here? Credit checks to make sure if they're a longer staying guest, they're actually going to pay those future months that you haven't collected quite yet. So all these things are going to get checked for, and it takes more often than not less than 5 minutes. Now here's the deal. This guest verification software will let you know whether or not the guest passed or failed the verification process. Just because a guest fails doesn't mean like it's an automatic they can't stay with us. Sometimes it's as simple as one partner booked for the other partner and there's some mismatch there. So it might take you more digging. Or they could have a criminal background that you're not comfortable hosting that guest with that criminal background. And what will happen is if the guest doesn't go through this verification process in a good amount of time, the software will follow up with the guest. 1 time, 2 time via email. If they don't answer via email, the software will text the guest, hey, you have to go through our verification process. If the guest doesn't go through the verification process, then in your home rules, we're hoping you have a rule that says that you must go through this process in order to get your check-in instructions. So this way, you can make sure that all guests are going through whatever you want them to go through. The most important thing is to make sure you put every single guest the same exact process. So no matter who the guest is, everyone's going through the same process. They have to match whatever house rules that you set for your property so that there's no risk of being accused of any sort of discriminatory activities or anything like that. We are just making sure this guest is who they say they are and they have good intentions for your property. Now, what do you do if the guest doesn't align with your house rules? You will have to put on your CEO hat or jacket or tie or shoes or whatever and call that guest and let them know. You did go through our verification process by our trusted third party. These are things that came up, and unfortunately, you have some checks that came through that aren't aligned with our house rules. Most of the time, people who had bad intentions aren't going to be that shocked that their verification process didn't go through. This does not happen very often, but when it does, you do need to face it head on and protect yourself and the property. You could also decide to go through with it. Maybe whatever you find in the verification process, you're actually not too worried about, and you're willing to take an extra deposit or really make sure that they pay the entire payment up front. But that's up to you and what you want for your property.
Now that you're prepared to screen your guests, you're probably thinking, but wait, how am I going to do this? Does it need to be manual? Of course not. Again, fear not. We've got your back on that. There is technology out there that is going to make this super smooth for you, and honestly, it'll become automated into your systems.
Here's what we use. As I mentioned before, we use Hostfully as our property management software, and then we integrate it with Superhog's Know Your Guest.
Yes, she did say hog, and it's called Superhog, but they are amazing.
Yes, they are amazing, and the process is super simple. I think the price is anywhere from like $7 to $10 per month per listing. And when you think about what it protects you and your property and your community against, it is a no-brainer.
And the amount of time it's going to save you from trying to manually implement this.
I don't think you could manually implement because the software that they have to check against to make sure that the guest goes through all those different things they checked for, you do need to leverage a company that has the right technology in place. Now, this is not the only option. That's not the only property management software. That's not the only guest verification software. There are others out there, but we know that sometimes it's just nice to know what we use. And so that's what we use. Go out there, get those direct bookings with confidence. Make sure you're matching your property up with amazing guests. And remember, amazing guests are going to love the fact that you are verifying your guests in your spaces.
Please find the link to Superhog and Hostfully below.